Thank you. Let's go live. Our poly panel, Liberal MP Jason Falinski, Labor MP Patrick Gorman. I noticed this morning you've got your Scott Morrison issued Australia badge on, Jason Falinski, perhaps talking about this foreign investment rule that's going to be announced imminently. It's an interesting time to sort of pull up the drawbridge on investment, make it a bit harder. Don't we need all the investment we can get right now with COVID-19?
Oh, we sure do need all the investment we can get, Tom. There's no doubt about that. But I think that most Australians would accept that that investment should not challenge our national security or should not cause our national security to be put in harm's way. I don't think any Australian would see this as a strange or indeed difficult decision for the government to make. I think that what the Treasurer has done and David Irvine have done over the last 12 months is something that we should all welcome and congratulate both of them for doing.
On board with this, Patrick Gorman, no Australian badge, but that's okay, I don't have one on either, but do you agree with the policy?
I'll firstly confirm I am in Australia. I'm an Australian citizen and I love this country, just in case there was any doubt in that question, Tom.
Well, I think we're seceding over there, that was all. But
the Prime Minister only gave badges to his own side. So, yeah, I have not been issued a ScoMo badge. As for the initiative of David Irvine, now, he is someone that I respect greatly. If he says this is necessary, I think it's something that Labor will look at very closely. Obviously, we haven't been briefed on the initiative yet. Personally, I'm relieved that it's only taken the Coalition 6 years to learn the lessons of the errors of the sale of Darwin Port. You know, some lessons, it took them a whole 10 years to learn the errors of their ways when it came to the stimulus necessary to avert the global financial crisis. So hopefully this is a good thing, but we'll wait to see the detail.
All right, and we're going to get the announcement imminently, so we'll bring that to our viewers live in a few minutes. Jason Falinski, confirmation you're a very influential figure in the party. You were tweeting out that JobKeeper had to end for businesses that were getting back on their feet early. What about businesses that were factoring in they were going to get JobKeeper for 6 months, and perhaps they were losing a bit more money before, but they thought, we'll make more money once we get back on our feet in the last period of JobKeeper? Isn't it a bit hard for the government to pull the rug from under their feet and end JobKeeper earlier than was expected?
Well, look, the government was very clear from right up front that this was not something that was guaranteed for 6 months, that it would be reviewed after 3 months, that we would do we were always going to make sure that this program went as long as it needed to and not a day longer. Tom, we are accumulating intergenerational debt at the moment. It is something that is exercising the mind not just of everyone in government, but a lot of people outside of government. If we can save $1 billion here and $1 billion there, it's $1 billion that we don't have to repay in the future. It's $1 billion that we can spend on health or education, or that we can use to lower taxes so that more money goes to productive sectors in our economy. This is incredibly important, that we don't waste other people's money just for the sake of wasting it. So look, if JobKeeper can end sooner rather than later, that is something that we should be very proud of. I would make the point though that it's not about ending the program entirely. What it is about is making sure that it is targeted to the right sector. So there would be sectors, especially in the tourism space, in the travel space, where you would expect some form of program to continue into the future, because they will remain largely shut down or nowhere near their true capacity for some period of time.
But how would it work? Would you, if you're in a sector that's seen as getting back on its feet and your revenue's still down more than 30%, do you get it? If your revenue's down 25 instead of 30, are you suddenly cut out of the program? How would you like to see businesses taken off it?
Yeah, so Tom, I would like to thank you for the opportunity of designing government policy on the run. I really do appreciate that opportunity, but I'm going to, on this occasion, not take you up on it. I think that this is probably policy design that is best left to the ministers that are in charge of it. They will have obviously all the factors that and all the data that they need to make those design sort of issues. Right. But look, where you can reduce it and better target it, I think that is something. I mean, we've ended up with world best health outcomes. We want to get world best economic outcomes too.
What do you think of this principle? You're free to develop some policy that'll never actually become an idea right now. In opposition, of course, Patrick Gorman. How would you like to see this all happen?
Well, what I'd like to see happen is the government stop inserting economic uncertainty every time they open their mouths. I think when it comes to JobKeeper in particular, there is this idea the government can't sit still. And what they said was we're going to put certainty into the market by providing this initiative. Now they're starting to unpick their own policies. We've got the same issue for people on JobSeeker. No certainty about what's going to happen post-September, whether that's going to snap back to the old New Start rate or what's going to happen there. The only thing that's certain from this government is that if you want 25 grand to build a library in your own house, they'll give it to you. I mean, seriously, you're saying that you can't support the jobs of people, or you can't give certainty for the jobs of people in hospitality and tourism, and I endorse what Jason said, that those areas have been hit hard, but you got to give them more uncertainty. It's just, they've just got to stop opening their mouths and actually just give the economy certainty at a time where things are so delicate.
So where would you sit though on if a business has got, say, 95% of revenue returned in this situation compared to before COVID hit? Is it time to take away a JobKeeper scheme that gives $1,500 a fortnight to employees? I mean, that seems overly generous from a budget that is limited.
Well, I think the government should start by actually looking at those that they excluded unnecessarily in the first place. People who've been casuals for a long period of time, people who work for organisations like Donata, we saw the protests yesterday, those people have been left on the scrap heap. I would like to see the government actually
what
start.
About the cohort I'm talking about?
No, but with respect, I think if you were to look at what is the bigger policy issue, the bigger issue is those people who are struggling week after week with no support, rather than rushing to rip support away from fragile businesses in Australia.
Well, there's not no support. The cohort you're talking about are getting JobSeeker, but what about these businesses? If they're 95% of revenue as an example, should they still get the full whack of JobKeeper? Is that a good policy?
Well, I'll actually agree with Jason on this. We'll leave it to those in Treasury who actually have access to the economic data to design the policy program. But it'd be nice if we actually saw concrete evidence of help for those who aren't receiving JobKeeper support before we start ripping it away from anyone.
I really wanted an explanation from someone in the government on why there's no money for social housing in the recent package, Jason Falinski. All we're hearing so far is, well, that's mainly up to the states. So is any sort of boost to housing. States have, schemes for first home buyers grants, so does the federal government. Why do you think the federal government isn't giving any extra money to social housing right now?
Well, Tom, we give almost $10 billion. When I say we, I mean the Australians through their taxes give almost $10 billion a year to social housing every single year. It's unfair for people in the Canberra Press Gallery to continue this assertion that we don't somehow support social housing.
I didn't say no money. I'm talking about extra money.
Yeah, but $10 billion is a lot of money, Tom, regardless of who you might be.
Let me put this to you then. Is it hard to stomach for someone right now who's waiting for emergency accommodation? We've just seen figures on domestic violence up 30% that might be waiting for emergency accommodation, that here's the government will give $25,000 for someone as a part of a $150,000 renovation to a house.
Of course it's hard for them to stomach that. Of course anyone who's in that situation wants the community around them, or when they need the community around them to help them, would find that hard. But that's not something that lies solely at the feet of the federal government. I mean, this is something, if you want to improve housing, if you want to improve housing outcomes in Australia, what you need to do is to get stuck into the states about why they're not providing more houses, why their planning laws make it that even though we live in one of the least densely populated continents in the world, we have some of the most expensive land in the world. Now, we have been trying social housing for nearly 8 decades. The fact of the matter is that we haven't shifted the dial on these things in that 8 decades because we keep concentrating on the wrong things. You want to keep putting more money into social housing? I'm there with you. I want to help people who are in vulnerable situations as much as the next guy, if not more. But the fact of the matter is that this policy is not going to solve the problem. The way to solve the problem is to actually get the states to start liberalising some of their planning laws so we can get more housing at lower prices for people in vulnerable situations. Now, Tom, we
okay,
announced
just,
yesterday.
if this was a big conversation the states
yeah.
were going to have, for example, and this could be a federation discussion perhaps,
Yes.
if all of that was something the states would look at, the federal government would be willing to put more money into it, do you think, or they should be?
Well, Tom, look, if it's going to work, I mean, we're spending $10 billion a year already on this, or almost $10 billion a year already on this, and what you're telling me is that it's not working. So why would you ask the Australian taxpayer to spend more money? Look,
Patrick Gorman, is there an issue here of...
Well, I've got to make the point that what we announced yesterday was about getting more tradies back in work because there have been 70,000 fewer construction
I understand that.
Now that's what that's about. It shouldn't be conflated with emergency housing.
If you build some social housing, though, you still get tradies jobs, don't you?
But we need short-term work because there's been short-term dry-up of work. Social housing is a noble undertaking that is a medium-term
you can
project,
do
which is not
repairs
going to
social
solve the
housing.
problem.
There's a huge backlog there. That's short-term, isn't it?
Sure, and every time we put hundreds of millions of dollars into clearing the backlog of maintenance in social housing, another hundreds of millions of dollars in backlog appears. I mean, this sort of simplistic idea
Doesn't that mean there's a big
that
problem?
throwing more money, there absolutely is a big problem, Tom.
All
There is no doubt about that.
I feel like we're leaving Patrick Gorman well out of the
solution.
conversation.
Well, I
I'm
apologise.
just going to bring in Patrick Gorman. Your thoughts on any of that? Is this a pretty big issue with some need for reform, not just a dollar figure?
That was the most extraordinary justification for refusing to invest in social housing that I've ever heard. The idea that because for 8 years,
$10 billion,
we've invested in it,
Patrick.
therefore we shouldn't invest any more. And
no,
Jason, I think
but
you know
it's
that
not working. You guys say it's not working.
Jason, really simple question. Is it $10 billion a year or $10 billion over 10 years?
No, it's 10 billion. When you add up all the Commonwealth government subsidies to social and affordable housing, it comes to very close to $10 billion.
So you're including New Start allowances in that, are you?
No, I'm not.
I think you'll find that we have just walked away from reality in terms of the very measly amount that the Commonwealth actually invests in public housing in this country.
The direct amount of money given to the states every single year is $6.9 billion.
Was over 10 years. Let's be accurate here, Jason. The only investment you've made,
yes.
The only investment you've made that is new in recent times was wiping the Tasmanian housing debt. And we know that you did that for votes in the Senate, not because of any ideological belief in investing in social housing. The reality is this package from your government, which we know that even your own backbench economics committee said seems like a pretty bad idea. We read that in the Australian today. What we know on this package is that you're giving money for people to invest in a second roof rather than giving any money to people who have no roofs at all. You campaigned against Labor's school libraries program, but now you're giving people handouts to build a library in their own home. I mean, it's ridiculous, and not $1.
No, what is ridiculous is what you're saying, Patrick. I mean, the one thing that we know tradies won't be building is the Labor Party policy platform, because there isn't one on this issue. Any time it comes to this sort of stuff, Labor's answer to everything is just spend more money, regardless of whether it's working or not. And what we know is
spend it carefully,
what we've
Jason.
done in the past hasn't worked.
You always tell me, spend it carefully.
There's a lot to discuss maybe next time. I'm going to have to jump in. I've gone well over. I'm already in trouble. Jason Alinsky, Patrick Gorman.
We hate it when you're in trouble, Tom.
Yes, I know.